Hi everyone, and welcome to the Fishhead Creations podcast, where I pull out one of my interesting knitting projects every time and talk you through the details. There has been a huge increase in subscriber numbers recently, and I suspect I owe this to Carrie. So first of all, thank you Carrie for giving my podcast a shout out on your Instagram, and welcome to our new viewers. I hope I live up to the expectations Carrie has raised about my podcast. Thank you so much for giving me a shot. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I hope we can all start talking more about what I'm doing, what you are doing, and if there's anything you would like me to talk about more, please let me know. Either in the comments or in the Revelry group, or on Instagram or whatever. I will link to all those social media channels below, and I will mention them again in the end. But welcome to new and returning viewers. It's a pleasure to have you here. This past weekend has been a whirlwind this whole past week it has been a complete whirlwind. I was just both weekends just gone. I've been traveling. I've rarely been home. When I was home, I was just so tired and couldn't do anything, but knit mostly. And I've been reading a lot again. And I'm rambling, sorry. So, I was absolutely busy all the time. I didn't do much knitting over the weekend, but over those days in between, I did manage some. So I will hopefully have a new design and garment to show you next week, because I should be able to finish it either today or tomorrow. Other than that, I have started my new work contract, which is still my old job, but increased number of hours, so it's a complete part-time job, so half of a full-time, whatever. It does mean I can look into registering a small business and selling my patterns, which I really, really want to do. What else? What I'm wearing. I think before we really start to dive into this episode, I should show you what I'm wearing, because this is Belmont. This is how the cardigan looks on. You can see I talked about this cardigan 2 episodes ago, so if you are interested in more details, please go back to episode, I think it was 21. It will be called Belmont. But yeah, this is it. I have to pull it on like a jumper, as I said, because it's sewn shut with the buttons, because I did 2 small buttonholes. I really like how it sits. I really like the almost square neckline, and the slightly puffy sleeves due to my 2 long sleeve caps. I do enjoy it. I really like it. I dug out an old skirt to wear with it, and it works really, really well. And this is the Spindrift, I think it's called, by Hans Stewart of Curious Handmade, in Martin's Lab hand-dyed yarn. I think it's the colorway Jaded on the Bouncy Merino bias, but don't quote me on that. It's just one of those simple shawlettes you can wear when it's too cold to not have anything around your neck when you're inside. I don't usually wear this as soon as I go out, because it just doesn't keep me warm at all. But for inside, it's quite nice. I don't like my neck exposed. I get cold easily just around my neck, so I like wearing this. But that's not what this episode is about. This episode is about this beauty. This was a test knit for Katrine Birkenwasser, who is a Finnish designer, although she has a German name, so she may pronounce it completely differently, but that's how we would say it in German, and her last name means birchwater in German, so I assume her family has roots in Germany. But yes, this is Longing for Snow. It has just recently been released on Ravelry, and I did test knit this for her several months ago, and now I can finally talk about it because the pattern has gone live. The yarn I used is Klinterwolle in their Nordi Sport Base, which is a yarn produced in Lithuania, partially from Lithuanian wool, partially from imported German merino wool, but spun and processed in Lithuania, and then re-imported to Germany and sold from there. It's incredibly affordable. I do believe they ship internationally, but I'm not sure. You might just write them an email if they don't offer any shipping method to your country. It's a rustic, it's a woolly sheepy wool. I really like it. I do like a good sport weight. I think it's comparable to those classic heavy fingering light sport weights from Norway, so like Rømer Fine, Sandnes Tove, all those things. I have no experience with the American brand, so I cannot compare it to whatever there is by Green Mountain Spinnery or Harrisville Designs or Brooklyn Tweed, but it's just this kind of woolly 2-ply woolen spun, although I'm not sure, it might actually be worsted spun. It's quite smooth for a woolen spun yarn, so I'm not quite sure what it is. But yeah, it does make a very nice woolly solid fabric. This is knit at a 24 stitch gauge, which is my absolute favorite gauge. I do need 3mm needles to get this gauge. Usually, you know me and my gauge issues, but I do like this gauge, and I do usually get it on 3mm, and it just works for all my favorite yarns, from light fingering to heavy sport weight. So yeah, the colors are undyed grey and undyed natural white, I believe. It might be a bleached white. I'm not completely sure, but white. What I really like about the grey color are those tiny black flecks. I don't know if it comes across on the camera, but it looks almost tweedy in some places, because there are just slight nubs of black wool in it. I really enjoy the fabric and color it gives. Just because it's not a flat color, it's heathered, it has depth to it. I do like it. My favorite spot on the whole thing, I don't know if I can find it at the moment, in one of the snowflakes, yeah, down here, there's one tiny black blip in the middle of this white snowflake. It's my favorite spot of the whole garment. What else? It's a top-down construction, so you cast on at the top and knit the yoke, then split for arms and body, and knit down to the length you want it to be. I think I did lengthen it quite a bit from what the pattern says, just because it's the type of yarn that will shrink lengthwise. But I did put the details on my project page, which will be linked down below, because I cannot remember how much I had to lengthen it, but in the end I pretty much got the recommended length after washing it. So it did shrink considerably. I did lengthen it by a few centimeters. I think maybe around 5 centimeters for the body and 7 for the arms. Something around that. This whole thing, as you can see, has several different snowflakes. It's 3 different ones around. So you are switching between 3 charts all the time, because you do charts 1 to 3, then 1 to 3. Although she does also include instructions how to make it symmetrical. But I went with the version she also did as a sample, which is asymmetrical and just repeats 3 charts around every chart. Isn't it twice for the size I did? I don't know which size I did. It will be on my project page as well, but my bust circumference is pretty much exactly 1 meter or 100 centimeters or 40 inch. So whatever is closest to that size, because I prefer 0 ease. What else? What's interesting about this jumper is actually the inside, because it's not knit by catching your floats the general way, but by doing leatherback jacquard technique. This technique means that for every whatever amount of stitches you put in between, I think in this pattern it's every 5 stitches, you will cast on an extra stitch, which is then purled with a yarn held in front. So it does create a separate layer of fabric, which I cannot show you very well because it's already felted in place, but it's not connected, and as you have seen from the outside, you are not able to see these extra stitches from the outside, and they do not count towards your final stitch count, because they don't lay. If these fingers are two stitches, the extra stitch is not in between them but behind them. So these stitches can just move next to each other, and the extra one will be behind it. please forgive me if I accidentally did any root gestures I didn't think of through. So yeah, it's a completely separate layer which can move behind the outer layer, and this means you don't have any long floats. For me, it has several issues. One, I hate purling. I do not want to purl when I'm knitting a yoke in the round, because I'm knitting a yoke in the round because I don't want to purl. So a purl stitch every 5 centimeters, not my favorite thing to do. Especially if it's in the contrast color and I have to maneuver the main color, which I'm holding behind the contrast color, to the front. Not my favorite technique. But also, it is used because it's more stretchy, actually, than catching your floats the traditional way by going over and under with the other yarn. You can see it's completely stretchy, it doesn't stop it from moving. But still, for me, it does pull in more. And it's a more stiff fabric just because of this extra layer, which I do not like. And this whole jumper it does have several fitting issues, which is why I decided to talk about it here. And just as a disclaimer, this was an early test knit. She did take several months after the test knit to figure out the issues that came up in my version, so I assume they are fixed in the final pattern. And I think there even was a second round of test knitting for this. So just because I do have some issues with this, it's not a problem of the pattern. It's really a problem of the early stage of the pattern which I knit, which was given to testing to figure out these issues beforehand. So please, my issues are not a reflection of the actual pattern as it is released. I did receive it, but have not yet looked at it. So I have no idea how it looks and how different it is from the version I did. But the designer was made aware of these issues through my test knitting version. So I assume she improved the final version. As you can see, it's a quite deep yoke. I think it's almost 25 centimeters deep. I usually prefer somewhere between 20 and 23 from ribbing to the underarm. And it's too narrow at the top. So it does increase slowly throughout the chart, and then again quite rapidly after it, and a few centimeters further down. So the last increase row is actually just before the split for body and sleeves, which for me makes it too low down when it reaches the place where it reaches its full stitch count. And you can see how narrow it is in the shoulders, even if I hold it like this. So what happens on me, and I do have narrow shoulders already, this very deep yoke is always pushed up, which makes it bunch up a lot in the neck especially, but also in the front, which is made worse by the fact that this is a double layer fabric which is so stiff. The original sample used I think a merino silk blend or something. It did have quite a high silk quite a high percentage of silk in the yarn that was used, so it's a much more drapey fabric the designer got, which probably acted against the issues that I'm having here. So yeah, for me this last increase down here came too late. There should have been more increases already before the start of the chart and early on in the chart. I do understand this is a very hard thing to put increases into because it's just 6 big snowflakes, but there is some space in between, and it just would have needed to be used differently. It's just the increase rate is too slow and the increases happen too low down, even with my short row gauge. So it's constantly pushed up, sits higher than it should, also because it is such a deep yoke that the split for body and sleeves happens several centimeters below where it actually is split on my body. So yeah, I do like it, I do wear it, but it's not my best fitting jumper in the world. It does ride up very much. And then also, I did talk about the amount of short rows designers put into their garments I think in my flame cola episode. This one, as you can see, if you compare the front and the back, has quite a considerable amount of short rows, and this does have the same issue that I complain about every time. It did already bunch up and bubble up in the back before I even started the extra layer, the color work and the extra layer of the leatherback jacquard fabric. And because it's such a stiff fabric, and also because it's constantly pushed up because of the shape of the yoke, these too many short rows in the back always stand out very much. So they really bunch up a lot. I would have done, if I had caught it early on, and I was thinking about it, even as I caught on and at the initial short rows, I would have done at least 2 sets less. So I don't remember how many sets of short rows it is, but I think around 7. And I would have taken out at least 2 of those sets of short rows just to make it something that can actually lie flat on a body. Because if you press it flat and lay it flat on the ground to dry, it will lay flat. But as soon as it's 3-dimensional, it will just bunch up and bubble up in the back, just because it doesn't correspond to the actual shape of probably any body. It just doesn't work 3-dimensionally, and especially not with a very stiff double layer color work, jacquard leatherback color work. So this yoke has a lot of fitting issues, but on the other hand, it's just absolutely gorgeous with those giant snowflakes, which is why I did sign up for this test knit at a point where I had no business test knitting anything, because I had so many things on the needles. And then after the yoke, it's slightly waist shaped. The sleeves are slightly tapered in there, quite wide. The body is also rather wide on me, but it does fit well. I like it, and it's just so cozy and lovely and sheepy, and I really like this yarn. I have knit one other garment in this yarn, which was a dyed dark grey or darker grey, and it's not as soft as this. I think just the dye does take some softness out of the garment. So yeah, I really like the fabric of this a lot, and it's absolutely cozy and warm, and it's not uncomfortable to wear. It just doesn't look too well around the neckline, so I usually just wear a bigger shawl around it to hide that issue. And maybe if it annoys me too much, I will at some point go back and just pick up the stitches above the color work, chop off the ribbing, reknit all the whole thing, the whole top with fewer short rows, and then bind off again. But I'm not sure if I will ever be annoyed enough to do that, because it's finished. I don't want it to be not finished anymore, so yeah. Overall, it does have some issues, it does have some very positive things. I do love the yarn and want to knit more with it. The yarn is incredibly affordable and cheapy. They only do very small batches of this yarn, so it can sometimes be hard to get enough for a sweater's quantity, but it's worth it, absolutely. I do have some dyed colors of theirs as well, and they're really nice deep colors. So if you ever order from them, make sure you get enough yarn, because it will be hard to get the same color again in the future, but it's a really nice and affordable yarn to play around with. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about this. Not my favorite garment just because of the yoke, but still one I do like and do look forward to wearing more now that it has cooled down and it's nice and autumnal and windy and rainy, at least at times. And yeah, I really need to sit down and compare the updated pattern to the one I knit, because I'm interested what the designer did about all these issues I talked about, because we did discuss them in depth in the testing thread, and I hope she did take something from it. Yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say about this. As I said, it's called Longing for Snow. It has just been released on Ravelry. The designer is Katrine Birkenwasser. I think she also has a podcast, Birkenwasser Knits. check it out on Ravelry. It will lead you to all the places you can find the designer. You can find me, speaking of it, as Caledoniana on Instagram. You can find me as Obsty on Ravelry, and you can find the Fishhead Creations Ravelry group on Ravelry as well. And I will link to all those 3 places below, as well as to the pattern and my project page for it. That's about it, I think. How do I end these things usually? How do I do things? It's only been 5 days and I've forgotten how to podcast because I was away all the time and I wasn't sleeping. Because I spent one night on a sofa and another night on an air mattress, so one of those blowy uppy things. Neither was comfortable, and the night on the air mattress also meant only 3 to 4 hours of sleep because I had to get up early after a late party to catch my early train back home. Here we are. So now I'm used to getting up even earlier than before, which is nice because I can start work at 7 in the morning because I work from home. I think that's it. There's some construction work outside. I did shut the windows. I hope you didn't hear it in the podcast because they are quite noisy and they are picking up again. So let's end it here. I don't know how to say goodbye today, obviously. Let's end it here. Thank you so much for watching. Welcome to all new viewers, and I hope you do not regret checking me out and giving me a shot. And I hope to hear from you in whatever way of communication is your preferred method. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope it was interesting, and I hope you did learn something or think about non-fitting garments in a different way or whatever. If I did explain something in an incoherent way, which I suspect I did, please don't hesitate to ask. And yeah, with that, I will let you go. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye!